停下。你刚才从哪里走过来的？
从上面那里啊。
上面吗？那你是走机动车道过来是不是？
我走上面。
走上面，那就走慢点嘛。你知道这个电动车不能载人，知不知道啊？只能一个人骑，明白不？还有要戴头盔的。头盔的。
对不起，那我也不做，我去中心买
请出示你的身份证。
我没带身份证，没带身份证。
身份证号码呢？记得吧？
不知道啊。
那有人脸识别，把口罩摘掉啊。
王爷子，什么？
下次注意了，好吧？
看看我们草人街的市场现在都这样式了，民兵，看看城管、交警，这家伙全来了，在这块草市街。
看我这全副武装干什么玩意呢？
防暴警察嚟攔住村民反對，俾人㗎。直頭管啊嗱，仲犀利嘅日本仔入村啊！你而家係做乜嘢啊？你哋？啊嗱，村民出嚟反對啊！全部唔俾啊！你係邊個？你係咪領導？你有冇？係。攞開佢！
现场有警察同志在，但是视若无睹，一边对强拆置之不理，一边跟村民说去找法院，这就是警察的执法标准。
你唔理呢樣嘢，啊，書記。
书记、警察、防暴都是强权，我们村民无力反抗，一切都变成一片废墟。
我们老百姓的守法遵纪，你们正在做什么？
啊！发到全国去，
带头强拆是吧？违法乱纪是你们带头的是吧？我们是遵法守纪的良民，你看你们要人保护的，就是证明你们违法乱纪。
你拿个法律人士过来，有没有经过法院的判决？啊！
身为一个公职人员，你今天做的是合法吗？你是代表你自己，还是代表政府？如果你是代表政府，他哪里有公文出来？
栏杆架动的架动，城管大队长刘伟严重违法。
升公路嗰啲路口啊，那个北路龙南啊，那边过来养来哦。
丽水区树洞就在那个水洞里吊死了一个人，江湾的女性，包海的女，在树洞里漏死去一个爹的。
The American people aren't asking politicians to hold China accountable. They're demanding it from members of Congress to the president. I have no doubt the president will continue down the path of holding China accountable. I hope he will sign Peter Navarro's resolution to stop purchasing medical equipment from China. As you know, the DoD and the VA are the two largest healthcare networks in America, and they purchase a vast amount of their medical supplies from China. We should immediately start with that and stop purchasing that equipment coming out of China and purchase American equipment instead.
At the moment, it's possible to fly into the UK, including from COVID-19 hotspots such as Italy and the US, without being screened for the disease.
For all arrivals to the UK, not only are there no checks, no airport measures, and no temperature screening, which is much unlike most of the rest of the world, actually there is no obligation to self-isolate.
A major study has found the antiviral medication remdesivir shortens the time it takes for COVID-19 patients to recover by an average of 4 days. A trend towards fewer deaths was also seen among those taking the drug.
The number of coronavirus infections in Japan has risen sharply since the beginning of April, particularly in big cities. Relatively few people are tested, so the actual number of infections is thought to be much higher than the official count.
Work on an anti-COVID-19 vaccine in Germany has meanwhile taken a step forward. Mainz-based company BioNTech says a first group of 12 participants had received a trial vaccine on Wednesday. But with the progress of infections still unpredictable across Europe, Germany's foreign ministry has decided to extend its global travel ban until mid-June.
The Chinese Communist Party have had something of a victory in terms of informational warfare. On Monday, the ambassador threatened Australia with economic sanctions. On Tuesday, they reported the meeting, or the contents of the meeting, with the head of DFAT, Miss Adamson, the head of DFAT, running a disinformation campaign. And then yesterday, they struck gold by being able to gate crash a press conference with the health minister. So it demonstrates the size of their political warfare arsenal, and they're chalking up some wins. So from a national interest perspective, I was rather upset as a member of the backbench serving in government ranks.
And we welcome steps that have been taken in the past days in that direction. Moving to a second category, our mission to protect human rights and freedom around the world. I talked about this a little bit last week. We continue to monitor with growing concern Beijing's increasing efforts to interfere with Hong Kong's governance. The erosion of Hong Kong's freedom is inconsistent with the promises that the Chinese Communist Party itself made under one country, two systems. Any effort to impose draconian national security legislation on Hong Kong would be inconsistent with Beijing's promises and would impact American interests there. I mentioned, too, last week that we're well underway in implementing the provisions of the 2019 NDAA on the 5G Clean Path. I raised this issue again of Clean Path so that Americans know that just as the Trump administration has taken unprecedented action to defend our physical borders, so too are we defending America on cyber frontiers. Simply put, in upcoming 5G networks, Mobile data traffic entering American diplomatic systems will be subject to new, stringent requirements if it has transited Huawei equipment. The objective is that untrusted IT vendors will have no access to U.S. State Department systems. We'll follow the letter of the law to ensure that we have a clean path for all 5G network traffic coming into all of our facilities. Period. We will keep doing all we can to keep our critical data and our network safe from the Chinese Communist Party.
As the president demands China compensate the world for the coronavirus pandemic, a top Chinese official is speaking out against him as the Chinese Communist Party steps up its efforts to control the narrative about the origins of the outbreak, reportedly a laboratory in Wuhan.
Those claims are preposterous. They present an out-and-out political farce. First of all, asking China to make reparations or these kind of claims, they have no legal basis. There is no international law that supports blaming a country for simply being the first to report a disease.
Joining us tonight to discuss this and much more, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Good to have you back with us, Mr. Secretary.
Shannon, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on this evening.
All right, so let's start there. China says stop spreading disinformation. They are the ones who were the victim of the disinformation campaign. We know the president has talked publicly about investigations he'd like to see underway by U.S. intel and others. How confident are you in saying that this actually started in that lab in Wuhan? And what more will we know from these investigations?
Well, Shannon, here's what we know for sure. This virus originated in Wuhan, China. We don't know the precise location, but we know lots of things that haven't happened. We know that it was an American. We know that this didn't happen someplace else. We know where it came from. We also know that the Chinese Communist Party has not been forthright. We know that when there were doctors that reported this, they weren't able to speak. We know they've kicked out American journalists. We know that they've tried to cover this up. And then finally, we know that the United States, along with others all across the world, have tried to get in to this place to find out what happened, where it began. It matters an awful lot to understand so that we can trace the history of this, so we can keep people safe even today. And yet the Chinese government has refused to allow those people in to conduct an investigation. The whole world is demanding that investigation. The world knows where this virus came from. President Trump's got it right. We need to make sure we understand where this precisely came from so that we can prevent something like this from ever happening again.
Their intention, phase 3, I called it in my book 12 years ago when I wrote this. Phase 3 is you just destroy or debase the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency of the world. And it won't happen so dramatically that people just say, oh, they're doing this to us. Instead, it's going to be the International Monetary Fund. It's going to be the World Bank. It's going to be China and Russia and a few allies. And then the Europeans come alongside and say, you know, it's ridiculous that the dollar is the sole primary reserve currency of the world. We ought to have a basket of currencies, maybe the SDRs, and they'll ask for the Chinese currency to be included among it. So it looks like it's a gradual effect. But that's happening right now because they want to remove our ability to fight this economic war. The Chinese coronavirus takes down our economy. You tell them to stand down, and you remove the U.S. dollar as the primary reserve currency of the world, and basically it's over in that fight.
Kevin, I want to be very specific here for our audience because we're trying to coach people up. And we have a lot of hedge fund people and a lot of the news producers, all the shows listen. But we're principally here for the deplorables. Talk to people. We got a couple of minutes left, like 3 minutes. Walk people through what is the prime reserve currency, why we are the prime reserve currency, and why it makes a difference in their life as a working class and middle class citizen of the United States of America.
Well, first, let me say that China is not in a position to replace the U.S. dollar today, probably not a month from now or a year from now, but they are in a position to force the international institutions to say, when I trade for goods and services between two nations, let's say an African nation and Russia or China or India, why do we have to use a U.S. dollar to do that? We should trade in our own currency, or better yet, a global currency. And so the push is they want to make international trade done in different currencies other than primarily the U.S. dollar. Why that matters to us is we have a $25 trillion debt right now, and part of it, a good part of it, is financed by foreigners. And the only reason that foreigners want to hold our debt is they think that it's a solid currency that is used for international trade. Now, with oil prices down, people aren't trading much oil. And because of that, the demand for dollars is going down. Right now, the demand for dollars is good. But when we get past this crisis, The Chinese are going to push no longer use dollars. And if they succeed, what happens is we're going to find it hard to sell our debt overseas. And if we can't sell our debt overseas, the only thing we can do is sell it to the American people or monetize it through the Federal Reserve. That's how countries get into hyperinflation. That's how currencies get destroyed.
Are we, could we become Argentina if we allow the dollar not to be the prime reserve currency?
You know, we head that direction. It is possible we become Zimbabwe, Argentina, Venezuela, Weimar, Germany. If we print money and spend money and increase our debt, rack up the massive debts like we're doing, and we don't have the tax revenues to offset it, we either have to raise taxes dramatically, which crushes the economy, or we have to print the money. And if we print the money, yes, that is how great nations' currencies fail, is they print the money, and that if it's not the reserve currency, nobody's out there outside of the country looking for it. So you're just printing money, and it becomes eventually worthless.
全人类最大的悲哀，全中国最大的悲哀，就共产党讲了几十年假话。悲哀的不是共产党，悲哀的是中国所有老百姓，自己一开始都知道说假话，最后所有人都跟着说假话，最后人连自己都相信这假话。亩产1万斤粮，共产党都敢说得出来，亩产1万斤粮。河南驻马店的猪生产了100多个崽，共产党猪下100个崽，亩产1万斤粮。接的那个瓜啊，比拖拉机都大，拉不动啊，粮食吃不完，然后这样的谎话你都说，你都信，你还干，结果这还不算数啊！全人类上最大的悲剧，大炼钢铁，把锅砸了，把盆砸了，上生产队吃饭去炼钢铁，你觉得人类上还有这荒唐的事儿吗？10年超美。10年超英，15年超美，改英超美，大跃进，今年多少年了？死了几千万人，你改英超美呢？2025一带一路，2035、2049现代版的大跃进，在有互联网的时代，竟然以暴民、老百姓无知、愚民、该死该杀的理由情况下，把一个14亿人口圈在一个墙里面。可悲呀！